Hi, I'm Bill Maynard. I work for Parks and Rec, City of Sacramento Youth Parks and Community Enrichment Department. We run the community garden program. We have 19 community gardens in the City of Sacramento city limits in our program, and we're at one of these community gardens today. Going to be talking about compost. So compost is very easy to do, and you could do it two ways. You could do it the easy way or the little bit more time-intensive way. You'll get different results. The cold composting takes the longest, maybe 9 months to a year. You'll get compost, and then the hot composting, you got to work at it a little bit more, and that takes about 2 to 3 months to get it. So it's really up to you on how you want to do it. And there's other ways that we'll talk about too on how you can compost very easily or use those food scraps in your garden and elsewhere. So cold composting, as they say, compost happens. And so you just throw all your scraps in a pile, and over time, the 9 months, it happens. The time versus temperature curve on the cold composting, you get the temperature rise and then it'll drop off, just like a bell-shaped curve. And so it'll heat up and then cool down, take about 9 months to a year for it to break down. On the hot composting, take about 2 or 3 months, and time versus temperature, it's going to go up, but we want to maintain that temperature as long as we can, and then it'll drop off. And so how we maintain it is by turning the pile from one bin to the other, just to inject oxygen into the pile, so it will help the microorganisms breathe and get moisture and things. And when we're turning it, we're turning the outside edges in because they cool faster, just like the food on your plate. So we want to turn those edges in because that's where the bad, let's say bad things may hide, like seed that might have got in there or other things like that. So we want to keep those in the center of the pile as much as possible. So when we talk composting, we talk greens and browns. So greens, we have all our food scrap, food prep waste, lettuce. This looks pretty good actually. So we got carrots. We have coffee grounds, which is brown, but it's actually a green nitrogen source. Some flowers, you could put flowers in here in their stalks, but you have to watch out for seeds, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Of course, your vegetable plants from your garden, and so we just have to watch out for some of these, and we'll talk about. But all that stuff are the greens. When we talk about browns, we got our green nitrogen source. So browns are the carbon. So leaves are our #1 choice because they're free, and you could get them at your front yard or your neighbor's yard, or come down to our parks and rake the leaves for us. So we'll be appreciative of that. Also, straw is one. We want to use straw, not hay, because hay usually has seeds in it. The straw is about $20 a bale, and one bale will do about a 10 by 20 foot area. If you have big leaves, you could crunch them up, but it's easy to put them in a garbage can and take a weed eater, and that'll really just pulverize them up and make them small, really compostable, really nice. But you don't want to use walnut leaves. Walnut leaves have a toxin in it, so that'll prohibit or inhibit the growth of the plant. So don't use walnut tree leaves. Oleander, you're always heard, don't use oleander branches to make marshmallows or put a hot dog on it because they're poison, so definitely don't do that. But you can compost oleander branches and leaves because the composting process will break down the toxin that's on those plants. The other option for carbon is newspaper. You just shred it up like that. You don't have to put it in a shredder. Just make long shreds, put that in there as well. It's soy-based ink, and it works really well. The things you don't want to use are color slick things like magazines, junk mail, because we don't know what kind of ink they use, anything like that. Other things that we can compost are eggshells. So we have eggshells, just rinse them out, crunch them up, put them in. That's a good calcium source. Another thing is dryer lint. So dryer lint, if you use 100% cotton towels or sheets, that's good to put it in your compost bin. Also, if you have a pet, you could use pet hair. You know, it's just protein for the compost process. Or if you get your hair cut, ask them for your hair to go. And I'm sure they'll give you a lot of hair. So you could put that in your compost bin as well. Things you don't want to put into the compost bin is like dairy product, bones, meat, cheeses, anything with the oil on it. Like if you have a salad and put salad dressing on it, you don't want to use that. It is compostable, but in the home composting process, it's not really allowed. You could give it to the city in their bins because they have a bigger composting facility where they have more machinery to deal with that and they heat it up more. But we want you to succeed, so we don't recommend you try to do those things. Things you don't want to put in are like, you know, the weed seed that you pull out, because those things are just full of seeds and they'll spread into your compost bin. Bindweed and nutgrass are really bad items. Things like corn stalks, or this is a sunflower stalk, this would have to go through the composting process for a year or more just to break down. So, you know, some people will take the time and take a machete and chop this up in silver dollar slices, but that's a lot of work. So give that to the city as well. Diseased plants, when you pull out your plants, look for things like powdery mildew and any insect damage, any insects where they lay eggs on the bottom of these large leaves. There's little nests of their eggs in here. So they're all trying to overwinter right now, laying their eggs for the spring to ruin your garden next year. So get rid of them. Sometimes their insects are in the flowers as well, so watch those. The worst case, you have a lot of zinnias in your garden, but all these, the flower heads, are all seeds. So best to just throw these away or keep them for your own use and catalog them. These are pink ones and things like that, and then you'll have free flower seeds next year. Same thing with the coneflower and marigolds. You know, marigolds, these are all seeds that you could save. One thing that will take a long time to break down are the avocado shells and avocado seeds. So you could put them in there, but and you'll probably get some sprouts out of these in your compost bin like you will with tomatoes. But you know, you could always pull those out. If you use heirloom tomatoes and you know what varieties and you like the varieties, then you'll know what sprouts up into the spring, and you could use those plants. But when you start making your compost pile, we want to cut everything 4 to 6 inches. So we'll cut these very small. You know, we don't want the whole plant to just be thrown into the compost bin. So 4 to 6 inches. Why we do this is because when we turn the pile with a pitchfork, we don't want everything all gnarled up and knotted up where it's going to take, you know, extra effort on your part to turn the pile. So we want it to come flowing out real easy. So 4 to 6 inches, you know, that includes vines and, you know, squash vines, anything like that. So, and tomato vines, peppers, everything. We don't try to, you can if they're small, but the root balls of the plant, you could throw those away as well, compost them with the city. Another thing you could compost are tea bags and coffee filters. So they're, you know, paper, so you don't have to worry about the little staple or the little string. You could include those as well in the composting process. So now that we have all our components, we could build a compost pile. So we're going to be making like compost lasagna with our green nitrogens and our brown carbons. And we'll start with a brown carbon, put a layer down 3 to 4 inches in the compost bin, and then we'll add a green layer, about equal amounts in volume when you add your to the compost bin. And you want to just make layer after layer, greens, browns, and you always want to end with a brown on the top, because if you have any raw vegetables like a tomato or carrot tops or anything like that, you don't want the flies to be attracted to it, and so you want to keep that canopy over the top of it to prevent that. And if you come out with your compost pail to the garden you can, just put your scraps in there, pull back the straw a little bit, dump this in, and you can just cover it up. You don't have to wait to have a whole bunch of green waste to be able to insert it into the compost pile. So once that gets to the top, and as you're making the layers, you can spray it with a hose a little bit. It just needs to be moist, like a wrung out sponge. You don't want it to be overly wet. The compost bin could be in the sun or in the shade. It could be on asphalt, it could be on concrete, or it could be on dirt. If it's on dirt, you'll get worms. They'll find you and they'll come up into the pile, if it's especially a cold composting process, and they'll start breaking it down. They don't like the heat as much, so they'll stay out of the hot composting process. So once we get to the top, then we could start thinking about flipping the pile. Once a week, if you did that once a week, that would be great. So you come here, especially it's nice to have 3 bins, so you could, when that gets filled, it goes over here. Then you could start making a second bin, and then you could start flipping this one back and forth as that one's filling up, and then you could do the juggling act when you're going back and forth this way. If it rains, some people ask if too much water is a bad thing, but you can cover it if there's a huge rainstorm coming, or you could, some people put a piece of plywood on top or a tarp, but not really necessary that much, because it needs that moisture. If you have, some people ask me about tumblers, those tumbling compost bins. They're smaller, so you have to maybe water them a little bit more, and you can't fill them all the way up to the top. They have to be able to tumble internally, so you can only fill them up 50 to 75%. So when you turn the crank, it it tumbles inside, and since it is smaller, it'll dry out more, and it has holes in it, so that moisture will evaporate. So keep turning it. You could turn it daily or every few hours. It's easy to do. It takes about 15-20 minutes to turn a pile this big in it. If that's a little bit too much time for you or work for you, you could use, there's a tool called the Compost crank, and it has a pigtail on the end, and you just sort of drill it in, pull it up, keep doing that, and you're just making air pockets in the pile. You don't actually have to turn it, but it's a good way to aerate your pile, so you're getting that air in there, down there, for the microorganisms. Your pile will heat up if you turn it on a regular basis, weekly at least. It'll heat up to like 160 degrees, and so it's a good process. In the winter, you'll see steam coming out of it. It's not on fire. Some people called the fire department on us because our pile was smoking, but it was actually just steam coming out. So that's a good thing, because you can see that it's hot. You could feel it. They actually have compost thermometers that you could stick in there and read the temperature. And if that temperature starts to drop, then it's time to turn the pile. Maybe add some things that are light, that will compost fast, like grass or lettuces, something little that breaks down fast. This goes really fast when you're doing that. All the vegetables actually work pretty well. You don't want to put any sticks in here, so everything is twigs, I guess, smaller than a pencil, to put it in there, and then again cut up 4 to 6 inches in length. Corn cobs are okay, but they're gonna probably go through the composting bin practice, and probably anything that doesn't break down that you find down here at the end, you could put it back in bin 1. So when you could use this as a way to sift your compost as well. So this is just a vegetable container flat, or flour flat, that you get when you buy a lot of vegetables or flowers, and you could just put your compost on top of here and pan for gold and put that. Then the same thing, I've used a fan cover. My fan broke, so I took the cover off, and you got the same type of thing. And so there's different holes for different, depending on what stage of the compost process that you're in. The final product, is what we're looking for, is this nice compost that you can't recognize anything that you put into it. You might see the eggshells, and from time to time you'll get if you didn't take the peach pit out, you'll find peach pits or avocado pits or avocado skins, but this is all the stuff that we're looking for, so it's pretty amazing. A misconception about compost, especially the amount of compost you'll generate, is when you fill that up, people would think that they would get that whole amount of compost. But actually, during the compost process, it condenses and compacts. So you'll get about 25% to 30% of the material that is compost as you get out. As you can see, the compost is pretty loose and airy, but it just takes all that air out of it and compresses. So you'll get about 25 to 30% of the compost. So and when you use the compost, you could spread that around your plants. You could bury it, mix it into the soil, use it in house plants as well. So it's good stuff. If composting process is too strenuous for you or something that you don't want to do, you could actually do it in your garden bed or a garden plot or under your shrubs. So just dig holes in the ground and take your little kitchen pail out and put that right in the ground and then bury it. So the worms will find it under the ground, and in about a month it'll be gone. So it's a good way to feed your plant, build your soil in there without having this in your backyard. Hi, we're at another one of our community gardens, and we thought we'd show you a variety of composting bins. This one's different from the last one we're at. The boards are thinner. As you can see, these are just 3/4 inch or 1 inch boards, fence boards made into a compost pile or bin. And the other ones that we were at, the last garden, are 1.5 inch thicker boards. So the difference between these two, this is cheaper, but it also break easier or dry out. Some of the pieces are starting to come apart and the boards crack. So the other ones will last you longer, but probably twice the price on there. But these are nice. They remove so you could get your pitchfork in there and to turn your pile. Same principle. You need at least 3 bins. We're going to add a couple more. We should add 5 is the ones, the number that we like to have at our gardens, because we generate a lot of green waste. It's good to stain these to, if you want that redwood, because this is all redwood. If you use fir, Douglas fir, or pine, it's gonna rot, a lot faster. These will last probably a good 5-6 years, if they don't crack or anything. But it's nice to stain these when you're constructing the bin, and then it keeps that redwood look. It looks a lot nicer. So now we're at the Marisol Village Community Garden. It's one of our newer community gardens. It was built with some grant money, so you could tell that the compost bins look a little bit different, a lot more sturdier. I guess you would call this the Cadillac of compost bins. It's made out of concrete cinder block, and you can see there's space between the blocks to let air come in. And then we have the same thing with the removable slats in the front, and you can see they're the thicker board and they're removable. So those were added, drilled into the concrete block, and these are sturdy. These aren't going anywhere. They're going to be here for a long time. It has a false bottom in it on dirt, so we got cement around it, but we have a decomposed granite bottom that drains, let the juices from the compost pile go into the ground so they don't spill out onto the concrete area. So very nice. I wish we could do this at all our gardens because they're so durable that it's great. You could actually paint them, put a mural on the outside of them, make them look nice. That's the Cadillac for you right there. So here we are at the Southside Community Garden, another garden of our 19 gardens. So this is probably the most inexpensive way to compost because everything was made with recycled materials. These are my mother-in-law fence boards from her yard years ago. So these fence boards are probably 30, 40 years old, still good condition, usable. So we do that. So the other side boards in here are made from pallets. You could usually get pallets for free anywhere. And then we just nail them together, make them nice and sturdy. Maybe put chicken wire in between the slats or add more boards between the slats to make it, and they rot away, so then you replace them. But same principle, you got the removable slats in the center. so you could get the compost in. This pile's been recently turned into here, into the next pile, and you can see the corn cobs. They're starting to get brittle by the second turning, so they're easy to break. So when we see them, we try to break them so they'll break down even faster. These are a good way to, if you want a lot of compost space, you make them out of pallets because they're free again. So try to use it, recycle the products as much as possible, and this is what we have here. We have 8 bin system, finished process after turning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. We got it here, and then we'll throw it into the screen and put a bucket in there, give it a shake, and anything that stays in the top, wood chips and things like that, they could go back to the beginning and start over. So when we cut the grass, we keep the grass clippings here. And grass could be a green or a brown. If you use it fresh, it's a green. If you let it dry out, then it's a brown. So it's sort of versatile that way. You want to make sure that when you cut the grass, it doesn't have any weeds in it or weed seeds coming up, because that would contaminate your compost again. So we try to keep it short. There's some pine needles mixed into it because we have a big pine tree over there in the grass area, so we don't mind that at all either. So, and then here's another way to sift your compost. It's some old recycled lawnmower wheels. Put on a bed, a wooden bed with metal on it, and you just put your wheelbarrow under here and put your compost in here and then shake it back and forth, and it will sift it for you again right into your wheelbarrow. This is the geo bin, and it comes in a nice little box, and you open it up and they give you some butterfly hooks that you just turn those on, and we have a nice 3 to 4 foot diameter compost area that we're going to use it for. So this is small holes so the rodents can't get in, things like that. And so instead of building it in there, you'll be building it in here, and it'll just keep rising up. And when you get to the top, instead, how are you going to turn this? If you had a compost crank, you could do it very easily inside here, but otherwise, we just sort of shimmy this off, take it off over the pile, and just move it over here. And so then we'll take this pile and turn it into this area here. So that's what, how you turn with the geo bin. And once you get this, 3 or 4 times across, and it starts breaking down, you could just leave this cake, compost cake. It's because it will hold its shape and form, and you could just spray it with water a little bit every now and then. It'll continue to break down in its cake form, and then you can start another one over here. So when you move it, you could move it in different areas of your garden bed, and build your soil that way. So these are real handy. This is recommended by many garden groups as a simple way to compost, space saver. You can make it as big or small as you want. With that, you could even hook 2 or 3 together if you wanted to, and have a big compost bin. The bigger, the better. You'd really want 3 foot to 4 foot circle or square. That just holds the heat more. So that's the reasoning behind that and why they made it the size that they did. And when you're done compost, you could lock it up, roll it up, put it back, and then you don't have the bins in the yard. But digging holes in your yard, burying it is good. Also, if you want to put your garden bed to sleep for the winter, it's a great time to just spread the vegetables over your whole garden bed and then cover it with straw or leaves, and the same thing will happen with the worms. Come up, will eat the garbage and the food scraps, and make good soil for you, and keeping the weeds down at the same time. So that's another benefit. People ask about rodents or skunks or raccoons coming around, and they dig around the bottom of the geo bin or around the compost bin, and that's sort of a natural thing that will happen. They have rodents or raccoons all over the city. Even though you don't see them during the day, they're there. They come out at night. And what you could do is put pavers out around the edges of your geo bin or around the bin. You could also put a top on it or screen so they can't get into the cracks and things. And this is pretty good. You could put a wood piece of plywood on top to keep it. These holes are very small, so they won't be getting in through that, but you could put the pavers around the bottom to keep them out from digging. Usually if you're composting like this, you'll end up with a garden cat. Maybe you have a cat, but the neighbor's cat will come over and they'll sit on top of the compost bin and watch for mice, and there's your mouse trap right there. So they do a good job with that. And if the mice are in here, it's better than in your house. So it's a good way to compost and take care of any problems that you have. So some things that could go wrong with your compost pile, not usually, but if it does sometimes. If it gets too wet, it may smell, especially if you're using straw. It has sort of a barnyard smell to it. So when you're turning the pile, if it has that smell or it's mushy, add some browns to it or greens, depending on what it's doing. If the fire goes out, you add the greens to stoke the fire, or the nitrogen, or if it's too wet, try to dilute it with some dry straw or leaves. Actually, leaves would be better because it doesn't have that smell to it. One other thing to help the compost process is if you got like a watermelon or a cantaloupe or an apple or whatever, you want to cut that thing in at least 4 slices, 4 sections, just to, as much as you can. Just take a shovel and just break it up, just so you get more surface area, so the microorganisms get into there, so they don't have to work through the rind to get into the center of that product. And if you wanted to take the time, like if you had a whole cantaloupe or something like that, you want to scoop out those seeds, otherwise you're going to have a lot of plants come up. And a lot of times like squash seed and things, if they come up and you could recognize them, those are like gourds. They're not really edible. But tomatoes, you'll have a lot of tomato plants come up through there because the gelatin gets dissolved in the compost process that's around the seed, and so the seeds will start to sprout. But again, if you don't use heirloom tomatoes, you don't know what you get. Most of the hybrid tomatoes will revert back to a cherry tomato, and you'll have cherry tomatoes, but it is a tomato. You could use the lettuce that's in a bag that's wilted into your compost bin. If it's been in there a long time and way in the back, it might have black mold on it. You don't want to use that in the compost process. So just take that out. But if it's just mushy, it's still good. I mean, not good to eat, but good to compost. Put it in your compost bin, but we don't want anything really moldy to go in there. If there's any mold in your compost bin, which you shouldn't get because there's going to be heat in there and you're going to be turning it, you shouldn't run into that in there. Just by turning it, you're mixing it around, so it should be fine. Another items that you don't want to use in the compost bin are like animal feces, dog and cat, or cat litter, things like that. So you definitely don't want to do that. If you use wood ash, if you had a fire in your fireplace, or you could use that if it's from wood, not from Presto logs or from fake wood or anything like that, or charcoal briquettes. You don't want to put that in there. But if you use wood ash, a little bit's good in here. Coffee grounds you could get at a coffee shop, no problem. And you can mix quite a bit in here without turning it acidic. So you can, add that in because it's a nitrogen source and it heaps it up. That's another one good. If your pile's going cold, you could put in the coffee grounds and help stoke that fire as well. Okay, so composting, easy to do. Just follow a few simple directions. Choose your way that you want to compost, hot composting or cold composting, depending on how much time you have. Composting is a great thing to do for the earth and the planet to keep the food waste out of the food waste stream. Nearly 30% of it is food waste in our landfills. So we want to eliminate that by making soil for your garden. It's a good family thing to do. Kids like to do it. They love to get their hands dirty, get them away from that computer screen, and get out there and garden, grow vegetables. They love to do it. The part they don't like is they're waiting 90 days for produce. But they like to get their hands in the compost and turn it and work with shovels and things like that. So it's a good thing to do. You're able to turn the vegetable waste and your gardening waste into usable, nice black gold, as they say, when we got the the compost here. Very, very good stuff for the garden, full of nutrients, and you saved it from the landfill. For more information, you could go to sacrecycle.org and find out more information and see what you could put in the city recycle bins and composting bins, but also in your backyard garden. You could always also come to the community gardens on different Saturdays to contact the community garden program, and they have work days and a lot of composting workshops available there, but they're glad to answer your questions. Or if you wanted to bring your composting waste to the garden to compost in our compost bins, we're open for that on our work days. So find out when the work day is, and you could always bring it to us and we'll do it if you don't want to do it. Hope to see you in the garden.